Really need pre-show music. Really need pre-show music.
Oh, and it looks like we're live. Wonderful. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Encyclopedia Show, a very special edition of the Encyclopedia Show Minneapolis. We are broadcasting to you from our homes, which is something that is I have an echo.
Wonderful. Hello, everyone, and welcome.
All right,
to the
hold on. Let me fix that real quick. We're here doing this for the very first time, as you might tell by that little bit of a blip, from our homes, bringing an encyclopedia show to you. And this encyclopedia show is brought to you in partnership with the Theater of Public Policy. And the way that this has been put together is the Theater of Public Policy is a show that runs a lot of performances where we bring artists and education things together, where we have a topic every month, and we have artists create a piece based on the topic of the month. For example, this month's topic is policy, and so we're going to do a show where we have had 6 artists and presenters all create individual pieces about policy. We don't give them a lot of direction of what that has to be, so they can explore. It could be about policies generally. It could be about a specific policy. It might be a song. It could be a poem. It could be a short story that's inspired by something, a TED Talk presentation. We've even had performers make condiment art based on that month's show topic. And so the performers will come up and they'll give a presentation that's about 5 or 8 minutes long. And then after that's done, we will turn things over to a very special person. And that person is our Encyclopedia Show fact checker, who is Levi Weinhagen. Levi.
Hello, everybody. My name's Levi. I am the fact checker for tonight's show. I am officially certified by the Institute of Human Knowledge and Hygiene. So I am trained to detect that truths and lies throughout each person's presentation. I've also spent months and months studying policy of all kinds, every kind of policy you can imagine. So what I will do after each person shares what they've prepared, I'll share with some feedback with that presenter, and I will make a tally of how much they spoke truth and how many lies they spoke in their piece. And I'll be keeping track of that throughout tonight's performance. At the end, we'll take a look at the truths and the lies, and if the truths win out, the show is victorious. If the lies overwhelm the truth, then unfortunately the show has failed.
That's pretty intense and scary. So I'm really hoping that we have our performers bring their A game, so we don't lose. Because what happens if we lose, Levi?
If we lose tonight's show, Duck, that will extend the quarantine that's been in place throughout many regions in the world, at least 8 more weeks from whenever the current expected end will be.
All right, so if we get to the end of the show and we lose, you can blame our perpetually having to sit in our houses on both our performers and Levi for judging them so harshly.
No. I'm just here to capture the truth. I'm impartial. How dare you?
Before we jump into the show, I want to let you all know about a little tradition that we have here at the Encyclopedia Show, where we invite our audience to write show-themed haikus. And a haiku is a short poem where the first line is 5 syllables, the second line is 7 syllables, and the last line is 5 syllables. So over the course of the program, if you feel inspired to write a haiku, please feel free to leave that in the chat line, whether you're on Facebook or you're on YouTube. And so people can enjoy your haikus as we go along. The Theater of Public Policy is really wonderful to have us here and host us on this platform. They told me I could take over a theater of public policy show to do what I want. And I had this encyclopedia show that I produced with the Reverend Matthew Kessen that seemed like it paired really well with the theater of public policy. And so I'm just kind of hoping that this can be me dipping my chocolate into my peanut butter and my peanut butter into my chocolate. And so we're all here together, but they're flipping the bill. So if you can, please help the theater of public policy out. On the streams, there should be links to where you can donate to contribute. They bring really important theater to the Twin Cities area and now all over the world, and now including the Encyclopedia Show here in its 8th year of programming here in the Twin Cities. With that done, without further ado, I think it's time for us to get you edutained, to get your belly full of laughs and your heads full of knowledge. So I'm gonna bring out our first guest. Please give a huge round of applause, even though he's not going to hear it, to Javier Murillo Alessia.
Hello, Doc. How are you?
Good, good.
Well, so happy to be here tonight to share with you my thoughts on policy. And specifically, I'm glad that, that Levi made it clear what the stakes are tonight, the quarantine, because that's what I want to talk about, in fact. It's about policy and specifically Minnesota and why Minnesota is doing so well at social distancing. And I'm presenting this to you all as some of you may know me as an activist. I was the leader of a labor union for a long time, but the people who really know me are folks over 65 who know me as that fella on Almanac who wears the nice ties. But I was an academic. And so I'm a social scientist. So I have a little presentation for you here today. And I'm gonna share my screen with you all. Just 1 second. And this is a presentation I'm calling How Minnesotans Are Bending the Freak Out of That Curve. The image there, of course, is one of the many you have seen if you have watched Governor Walz's, Professor Walz's, his press conferences. So comforting, his leadership, you know, as compared to other leaders we see talking about COVID, et cetera. And he gives these press conferences that always make you want to think, you know, want to ask, Professor Walz, is this going to be on the exam? And you'll know if you've been following these that Minnesotans have been bending the curve. Minnesotans have been doing this really well. We have the lowest per capita infection rate than any state and lowest death rate at the moment. And I want to speak to why that is. So what I'm going to present to you tonight is a part of a chapter of a book that I am writing. My upcoming book, My Minnesota Anthropological Observations. You'll see from there, it says PhD ABD. If you don't know what that means, ABD means all but dissertation, which is to say that I do not have a PhD. But because I came to Minnesota many years ago to teach at Carleton College, and I was working at the time on a dissertation. I later changed careers, but I came to work and teach as a historian and anthropologist. And when I first came to Minnesota and drove in on a U-Haul, drove into Northfield, Minnesota, and those of you who've been to Northfield will recognize this sound. It's this sign. It's the sign that welcomes you to the town of Northfield, and it says, Northfield, cows, colleges, contentment. I looked at that sign and I thought, contentment. We don't even shoot for happy here. And from that moment, Minnesotans seemed a mystery to me. But they were not my field of study, Minnesotans. Minnesotans became my field of study when here and just fascinated by the many, many things about this culture that I immediately realized. Now, as an anthropologist, I am trained in the art and science of observing and analyzing and coming to the conclusions about exotic other cultures. And so you, the Minnesotans, are the exotic culture that I study. Now, every anthropologist has a story about how that aha moment, how they came to realize that this was the group of people who they needed to study. And my aha moment came about 1.5 years into living in Minnesota, and it came by way of Eartha Kitt. Some of you may know Eartha Kitt. I should hope you know Eartha Kitt. She was a singer. She was a Catwoman on TV's Batman. Had the first interracial kiss on television was Catwoman and Batman. And Eartha Kitt is a singer. You probably know her from her standard, from Christmas Time standard, Santa Baby. As an aside, there's a rule about that song. If you are not Eartha Kitt, do not sing that song. You just sound like a whore. Anyway, Eartha was in Minnesota. I was about 1.5 years into being here in Minnesota. And my partner and I, partner John and I, we decided to go see Eartha because I freaking love Eartha Kitt. She was playing at the orchestra hall in Minneapolis. And it was fall, but it was that year we'd had a very early cold. It was one of those nights that is so cold that you know, weather people named Belinda Jensen and Sven Sundgaard tell you exactly how many seconds you can be outside before your skin freezes. It's that cold of a night. And people, you may not know this about Eartha Kitt, but Eartha, she was a lover of languages and spoke many languages. And on stage, she spoke many languages. And so on this cold, cold night after the show, I did something I don't normally do, which is I went backstage to get an autograph. And when I was in line to get an autograph, I was next up in line. And I said to Eartha, as she was looking down, signing something for the person in front of me, I said to her in Spanish, "Usted aprendió español de un puertorriqueño." You must have learned Spanish from a Puerto Rican. Because when she spoke Spanish on stage, I had recognized the accent. Now, Eartha did not look up from what she was writing, but she addressed me. She said, "Es usted de Puerto Rico? Are you from Puerto Rico?" And I said, "Sí." Eartha still doesn't look up, but she says, "Y ahora vive aquí? And now you live here?" And I say, "Sí." Eartha finally looks up, locks eyes with me, and purrs. ¿Por qué? Why? And that question stuck with me, because why indeed? What is a Puerto Rican doing in these cold climes? And in fact, it is the weather that people most often think about when they find out that I grew up in the tropics. They say, "Oh, what's the weather like?" And here's the thing, weather, that's not the hard thing about Minnesota. The interesting and difficult thing to decipher about Minnesota is Minnesotans. So that's where I became a student of the Minnesotans. Now, back in the day when I studied anthropology, the anthropologists had a habit of describing their subject of study in a particular way. Now, anthropology is a discipline born of colonialism, and it was generally white people, white Europeans or white Americans studying non-white people. And that, of course, has changed in recent years. But even when I was in graduate school, people had a habit of describing their object of study, the culture that they were working in. They would say, "My people, my people." And so Minnesotans, you know, like my people, people of color say that, like Puerto Ricans, I said, it was like, Puerto Ricans are my people, Boricuas, my people. Minnesotans, you're not my people in that way, but you are my people in that I have been studying you. And I want to share some of the conclusions and the characteristics that I'm sure for many of you will be familiar. For one, a defining characteristic of a Minnesotan is just how obsessed Minnesotans are with Minnesota and Minnesotanness. And this is fairly unique. You know, You don't in Connecticut, people don't say things, oh, that's so Connecticut. It's just not a thing. Minnesota, it's a thing, right? And partly, you could feel that because Minnesotans don't leave Minnesota. You might, if you're traveling, run into a free range Minnesotan who's wandered away from the state. And if you do, and they find out that you live in Minnesota, all they want to talk to you about is how they're going to return to Minnesota. So Minnesotanness is a thing. It is no state compares. The only state that could really compare is Texas. But but Texans, they go overboard with it. The don't mess with Texas. That's just prideful, right? That's not very us, not very Minnesotan. Concepts of home in Minnesota. So one thing about this quarantine that I think a lot of Minnesotans did well with, right, is that Minnesotans on a good day, they don't invite you to their home or to their second homes, which you call cabins. But, now, some have disputed this. I was, in fact, with a group of Puerto Ricans here in Minnesota, and a friend of mine said, and I said, oh, people won't invite you to their cabin. And she said, oh, I've been invited to a cabin. I said, really? You've been invited to a cabin? She said, yes. I said, really? Did they set a date? Did you get an address, GPS coordinates? Did someone take out their phone and send you a calendar invite? Because if none of those things happen, when your friend said to you, you should come to the cabin sometime, your friend was not inviting you to the cabin. Your friend was informing you that she owns a cabin. So Minnesotans, when told, stay in your home and don't invite anyone in who doesn't belong there, said, I can do that. Next up, I'll give you an example of a subculture of Minnesotans now, and how Minnesotans behave in the world. Now, when we first got to Minnesota, my partner and I, we'd go out into the gay community, and I was, observed like Margaret Mead in Samoa, and just observing what's happening, and immediately realized that gay men in Minnesota hang out in packs, because they've all been here their whole lives, and they all hang out with each other. Now, sometimes it would happen that for a work event or something like that, that my partner and I would run into would meet a stray gay who had wandered from his pack, and we'd have a great time and talk, and it'd be really great. And we thought, oh, we made a gay friend. But then the next time we saw this person out, the stray gay, we saw him out maybe at the bar, he'd be with his pack. And the same thing would happen. And one time, I swear this is true, happened 3 times in 1 week, that we went into a bar and saw a gay person who we had met before, a stray gay, but he's with his pack, and he did not introduce us to any of his friends. And his friends not only didn't introduce themselves, they turned their backs on us. Happened 3 times in 1 week. I said, and partner, and we're just like, what is going on? Like, is there something about us? What's happening? And it was many years before someone deciphered this for me, because I thought, like, these people are just rude, they're weird. But it's the classic mistake of an anthropologist who uses their own culture to assess and analyze another, instead of looking for judging a culture on its own terms. And this was explained to me as, they're being polite, they're giving you your space, because since they don't know you, they are giving you your space with your friend to talk. Now, I still think that's super weird. But what all of these are, all 3 of these examples are just examples of how social distancing for Minnesota, it's just a way of life, right? When they first started talking about this in Minnesota, about social distancing, they're like, many people were just confused. Like, is there another way to be social? And you probably seen the meme that's gone around, like 6 feet. That seems like a lot. Huh, there's something to that. But from all of this, you may surmise and think that, well, that this man is hostile to Minnesota, and that is not true, not at all. I've lived here almost 20 years, and I love this state. I love this state and all its quirkiness. I adopt it all. When I heard about Gray Duck, I thought that is freaking weird. I'm on board. I love it. Whenever a national journalist insults Minnesota, I get right on board, get on the Twitter and slam them along with anyone else. But why I, an anthropologist, truly love Minnesota? Because if Eartha Kitt today were alive and asked me the same question, ¿por qué? I have an answer. Well, Eartha, it's because I am Jane Goodall, and these people are some weird ass monkeys. Thank you, Duck.
All right, everybody, give it up for Javier. Javier, do you have anything that you would like to promote or point people towards while we have you here?
Yes, I am one of the co-hosts and the creator of the Wrong About Everything podcast. It records every Friday. We are doing now live streams at 3:30 p.m. We call it the Wrong About Everything Quarantine Happy Hour. It is 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans talk about the week's news. We've been doing this for 5 years. It's a fun, it's a lighthearted way, a fun, irreverent look at Minnesota politics, where people who vehemently disagree about politics, but who actually like each other, talk about the week's news. wrongabouteverything.com, where you can see wherever you get podcasts, or Wrong About Every on Twitter. You can follow us there, and on Facebook, Wrong About Everything Minnesota.
Awesome. Speaking of wrong about everything, let's bring out our fact checker, Levi Weinhagen.
Oh, thank you, Duck. Thanks for bringing me back. First of all, great job.
I know, you got the Gray Duck thing wrong, but what else did you think of his performance?
Thank you for asking that. I do want to say great job from Javier. I've known Javier for a while now. I've gotten the chance to work with him. So luckily I have some insights just from connected to his work in the past. But overall, wonderful, wonderful work, really illuminating. So a few things that really stood out. One thing, right away you said you were a social scientist, but as we know, all scientists wear lab coats, so that's not true. You managed to say you have a PhD and then say you don't have a PhD, really straddling the line of you ended up being wrong twice, just by trying to have it all is what you're trying to do. You did call Minnesotans exotic. That was accurate. I know you've experienced in your life people asking you, where are you from? Where are you really from? In Minnesota, when we say, where are you from? We're really asking, what high school did you go to? And if it's not a Minnesota high school, then we don't want to talk to you anymore. You showed the Northfield sign, which was wonderful. A thing you neglected to mention is that it is the exact opposite of the Puerto Rican flag. It is the most embarrassed symbol you can find in the world, while the Puerto Rican flag is incredibly proud of itself. Mm-hmm. You used the term whore. We all know it should be sex worker. I mostly wanted to point that out because I knew you would actually feel bad about that. You got points for saying, for purring. It was a fantastic purring, terrific. One really important thing to keep in mind, anytime you say Belinda Jensen's name out loud, she gets pregnant. So just be careful with that. You said that gay folks travel in packs. Mostly that's about huddling for warmth. That's the key thing there that you didn't bring up. But we do call that turning your back behavior seething with politeness. So just to give you that terminology that you can use.
Did you just gay explain me? Yeah.
We can do cleanup later. We can really unpack the damage to our relationship this has done. And the last thing that was true is you said you love Minnesota, and it's proven because, as you explained, Minnesotans love Minnesota so much that we make everything about Minnesota. And you took the topic of policy and spent 10 minutes just talking about Minnesota, which proves you are officially a true Minnesotan. I do have, you got 6 truths and you had 8 lies, but it's actually 9 because Jane Goodall studies apes, not monkeys. Monkeys have tails and apes do not. So just wanted you to know that. But otherwise, great job. Everyone, let's hear it for Javier. Really good work.
All right. Thank you, Levi. Thank you, Javier. That was some fantastic work there. But now it's time for us to bring out our next set of entertainers. These are 2 fantastic people that I've gotten the pleasure to know, working with them in the theater of public policy. It's their very first time on the Encyclopedia Show. But let's give a huge welcome to Jim Robinson and Dennis Curley.
Well, yay.
Thank you. Yay.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you. Now, I'm Jim Robinson.
I'm Dennis Curley.
And we wrote a song about policy around cats in the city of Minneapolis. And our hope is through this song that you will enjoy, learn, and obey. Dennis?
I come from a long line of regal blood, the panther, the cougar, the lion. Despite my small size and my fluffy mane, I am the Bengal tiger scion. So try to imagine how I feel when you coop me up in the cellar and snip off my bits and file down my claws so I don't run wild like old Yeller. I'm not a dog. Let's get that straight. Oh, lie, 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 lie.
Here we go. A Minneapolis resident can own 4 cats, 4 dogs, 4 rabbits, or 4 ferrets without a permit.
Did we lie, 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 lie?
However, if you have 3 cats and 1 dog, or 1 dog and 3 ferrets, you'll need to purchase one of our annual permits.
Is it a lie, 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 lie? I'm bred to kill birds and rabbits and bats. I'm not meant for tuna and kibble. Though I look so sweet and cuddly and cute, I'm as crazy and vengeful as Sybil. Still, you look me up and you collar my neck and you fatten me up like a sheep. And you keep me indoors with a pink litter box while I plot your demise in your sleep. I'm gonna steal your breath. Nighty night. Well, lie, 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 lie.
Crocodiles, caimans, alligators, and turtles with shells smaller than 4 inches are prohibited. Tiny, non-venomous snakes can live at your home for free.
Did we lie, 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 lie? Is it a lie, 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 lie? I hope you're counting, Levi. One more verse. You never would tame a wild hurricane or ask a wind-whipped wildfire to calm down. Your laws are for naught, they serve but yourself and your uptight Midwestern hometown. You may license and collar your dash hounds, domesticate those of no merit. I'm meant to run free, you can't control me like a cheesehead, a packer, or a ferret. Well, lie, 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 lie. Did we lie, 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 lie? Is it a lie, 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 lie? Let's ask. I said, let's ask. Let's ask Levi.
Weinhagen.
All right, Jim and Dennis. Excellent job. Excellent job. Jim, Dennis, do you have anything that you would like to point our audience towards as we have you on?
Yes, we would.
Well, we're happy to say you've promoted the Theater of Public Policy, which is continuing online through the month of April. But Jim and I mean, if you liked this song, don't worry, I don't play guitar on this CD, but we wrote an entire CD of original music. It's Americana with a little country twinge. It's a vocal trio. It's me and Dorian Chalmers and Becky Schlegel, a great band of 6 people. The band is called Honeywine. The CD is called Gods Among Us. You can find it online at honeywineband.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you both. Levi, what did you think of Jim and Dennis?
Well, Duck, of course, it doesn't really matter what I thought of Jim and Dennis. What matters is how they did when it comes to facts and not so much facts. First of all, I just want to say really great musicality. I think we can all agree, everyone watching and listening right now, they enjoyed the guitar playing, the harmonizing, even the talk singing parts were really great. It is the closest we'll ever see to Jim Robinson rapping in any way other than an old improv game that no one should ever play ever
No,
again.
never.
No,
never,
no.
never.
I will say this is, I think, the most aggressive direct attack at a fact checker I've seen at the Encyclopedia Show, where someone made a piece that was about confronting the fact checker. So
Yeah, we name checked you, Levi. I hope that's okay.
it's, of course, that's fantastic, and that was my name. So that's one of your facts right there. That's who I am. I nailed it. I'm really proud of you there. A few things. So I'll cover a few of the items that you just got at, policy wise. One thing that you got wrong, you can have unlimited ferrets in the city of Minneapolis. So there are rules about cats and rabbits, but you can add as many ferrets as you like. It's sort of an endless stream of ferrets. You can fill a room with ferrets. You can fill a house with ferrets. So you were a little off there. You did mention cats stealing your breath. What you didn't mention is the hit cover brand Steal Breath, which performs only songs from Cats the Musical. So that was just sort of a lie by omission, just not bringing that to the fore. Also, you said doc sound. I don't know.
I said dash hound, and that was a shout out to my friend Josh Will, who can't pronounce dachshund.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of an inside joke.
Yeah, it was an inside joke and it was wrong. So that's kind of a bummer for you. I mean, I hope he laughed somewhere because it was a waste of our truth. Yeah.
Let me know if this helps. Midnight, not a sound from the pavement.
No, that's
Nope,
making
doesn't
it
work.
worse. But the overall problem here, fellas, and I hope it's okay if I call you fellas, is you mentioned Regal Blood and Bengal Tigers, and at no point did you speak the painful truth that Carol Baskin killed her husband and fed him to tigers. So if you were going to mention tigers at this moment in history, and you're not going to talk truth to power, I don't think we can really.
Jim, that's that show called Tiger Beat. It's about teenagers who go to the mall and I think they have a pet tiger.
One of the best things about being me is that I get to shop early now, because if you're over 60, you can go to the grocery store at 7. So I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm really excited that Jim doesn't get the reference and that Dennis made a better joke than me. So both of those things happened just now. A Tiger Beat reference is better than a Tiger King reference. All in all, great job, fellas. We are now at 11 truths. Unfortunately, 16 lies, because that was kind of loaded with them. So we're going to see how this goes. Back to you, Duck.
Oh no! I'm all right. Well, thank you, Jim and Dennis. I'm sad that you weren't able to catch us up point wise, but I really appreciated your song. Like I mentioned before, this was Jim and Dennis's first time here with us on the Encyclopedia Show, and our next presenter, it's also their first time here on the Encyclopedia Show, and I'm really excited to have her with us today. Please welcome to a screen in your house, our Minnesota State Auditor, Julie Blaha.
Hey, I'm so glad to be here. And I'm also so glad to be following professional entertainers and people with lots of experience, because that's everything that an auditor wants. Well, so I'm going to start with what I like to tell people anytime I have a captive audience, is to talk about one idea. If you leave here with one idea, I want you to know this: you are smart enough to make life and death multi-billion-dollar policy decisions. Yeah, again, this is State Auditor Julie Blaha. My job is to oversee nearly $40 billion in local government spending and all the good work those funds represent. Now, since I work with the level of government that most people are introduced to policy for the first time, and I was a middle school teacher, my crusade is to make sure everyone has the skills and the confidence to engage with policy work, because I know the more of us involved with decisions we make in government, the better those decisions will be. Now, all you need to be a policymaker is 3 things: an open mind, a little bit of math, and a lot of questions. Don't believe me? I think I lost some people when I said math, but let's walk through a recent decision I was part of as part of the Executive Council. Now that's the governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, attorney general, and me as the state auditor. Our decision was, how should Minnesota respond to the coronavirus pandemic? Now this is about as big a decision, right, as anyone in government will make. And I'll show you with this idea that you have the skills to follow the numbers on a decision like that. So open up your mind, join me on my desktop for a little bit of math, and let's start asking questions. I'm going to switch down to my favorite happy place as a teacher, what I think of as math world down here. This is where I like to live. The math we used for our decisions was in the form of a model. Now, first question, of course, what is a model? Well, I like to think of a model as a machine. Now, the gears that run this machine are things like the structure of the model, parameters, formulas, assumptions. In fact, the ones I'm showing here are the actual components of the Minnesota model we're using today. Well, once you've got your model together, the next step is to put in your data. Now, as you can imagine, you want lots of data, you want effective data, you want as much as you can get when it comes to data. The better the data, the better the result. So once you take your data, put it through your model, turn the crank, otherwise known as running things through your modeling software, and out pops a projection. Now, I want to stop here for just a second. I want to use the word projection for a reason. Some people like to call these predictions, but I worry that can get people thinking that a model is assured. Well, models are a lot of things, but one thing they are not is a crystal ball. Just like a weather forecast, a projection is helpful, but not an absolute sure thing. Now, as the saying goes, all models are wrong, but some are useful. So with that, let's now take a moment and dig into our projection. So all you need on a projection, we're just going to keep it simple. We're starting at a high level, like most leaders are going to do. We're not going to look at specific numbers or dates, but rather overall patterns. So to get going, we want to compare the number of new cases compared to time. Now, what else is important to look at? Another good question, and that is our capacity. We need a line to show the number of hospital beds, protective equipment, ventilators, tests, all of that stuff. So once we have our setup, let's try some scenarios. First scenario we asked about was, what would happen if we did nothing? Well, here's what we got. We got a curve like this. Now, virtually every single model you'll see out there will give you this curve. So key question on this curve is, we see the progress, right? It goes up quick, tops off, and comes back down. So the question is, can we handle that? Well, you know, this curve rises above our capacity. So the answer is no. Anything above your capacity line, well, that now is a place where more people are going to die. So we have to worry about this line. We go over it, it's tough. All right, so if that doesn't work, the next question is, well, can we get the numbers down? Can we try something like this? How can we get the curve to look like this? Can we get it so that it'll just flatten out, flatten the curve, you've heard that. Can we get it to flatten out and stay under that capacity line? Well, to make that happen, we had to put assumptions and all kinds of things into the model. And what it basically had to be to flatten it out would be things like extreme quarantine for until we get maybe a vaccine. That could be over a year. So that didn't seem like much of an option as well. So what's our next shot? Can we try something else? So the next check was, well, what happens if we do some sort of combination? Can we do something with some smarter mitigation, you know, some social distancing, keep some things open, close some other things, kind of a midpoint. And what we found was this curve. Now we're able to do things like shift the curve back. Now you'll notice the curve's about the same height, but it's back in time. Well, does that help? Well, the next question is, can we make that work? Well, we can only make that work if we can move this capacity line. So if this line can move up, if we can move this up and get this line over this line, we have some options. We can get better outcomes. So as you can see, we started this chat with some math, right? We started this chat with math. We asked a few questions, and what did we get? 3 different options. Now we have choices. Now, before we made actual decisions, of course, we asked more questions, which led to more data, and refined the model and more projections. And where the health experts and the governor and our entire team came down was this, our stay-at-home order. Now, I'll bet if you have been watching, you've been watching for about 4 minutes here. I'm gonna bet that in that 4 minutes, you've already come up with some of your own questions. I'll bet you followed that. I bet you can have a conversation about this. See, if you can keep asking questions, those questions will lead you to choices. Then all you have to do is pick the best one. So the next time you wonder if you can make major policy decisions, don't worry if you don't have all the answers. In fact, try to go in without any answers, just an open mind. Grab some math and start asking questions. You can do this. Happy policymaking. And that's why I know you can do this, Doug.
All right. Thank you, Julie. I feel really confident that I can make some policy decisions now. I've seen people making policy decisions at really high offices with way less information than Julie had. So thank you. But that's
a comedy show. I'm glad that I could bring some math to it, because that's always how you lift it up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I work in a math department, so it's a win-win. Julie, is there anything that you want to direct our viewers to?
The fact that you can run for office. Basically, my gig is to help you if you get elected to local government. So run for office. We need you.
Awesome. So run for office, make decisions, learn math. Awesome. Levi, what did you think of Julie's presentation?
Oh, hi, Duck. Thanks for bringing me back. Julie, really terrific use of materials there in front of you. I wanted to not pass up the opportunity to say that you are officially America's crappiest auditor. So I just want everyone to take note of that.
And I will take that as a compliment.
It is. No one cares about crop art like you care about crop art. I will say this was a tough one for me. An auditor and a middle school teacher are people who are pretty detail oriented. So really exciting thing is you brought in a lot of hard facts, a lot of truth to this. So we're going to see some good changes on the scoreboard. However, I have a few things that I need to touch on. One thing is you were talking about math for a good long while there, which was not great. And then suddenly I feel like I blacked out, and then you were mentioning death. So that was just terrifying. People suddenly started dying. You used the word projection, which we all know is when you watch a movie on the wall in a room or a building outside somewhere. That's a projection. So that was a weird big mistake. Also, it wasn't really wrong, but it's sort of a dime a dozen with the George E.P. Box quotes. We're really seeing George E.P. Box memes everywhere right now.
Old. It's old hat. It's hacky. I'm so sorry.
It's just overused. It's overused. It's like, oh, here we go with George E.P. Box again. I'll be shocked if we don't see it from the rest of our performers, frankly. So that was a little problematic. You used the phrase extreme quarantine, and I really would have liked some proposals from you about is that like dirt bikes in our living rooms? Like, what could that look like? I think you didn't run that out enough. And then the other piece is you maybe a little bit ruined Mardi Gras for folks using that many beads to represent illness and death. I think is going to just be hard for some folks in this troubling time right now. So a little worried about that. But overall, great job. And as I said, a lot of truth here. So we are now up to 25 in the truth area and only 19 with the lies. So the truth is currently ahead, thanks to our talented state auditor. So great job, Julie. Let's hear it for Julie, everybody.
Oh, and Levi, I need to thank you, because if we do lose this and you extend the order, I think it's really important that all of us on the executive council, particularly the governor, are really happy that it is you that is making this decision. So again, wonderful work.
You couldn't sound more like a politician right now. Back to you, Duck.
All right. Thank you, Levi. Thank you, Julie. That was fantastic. We are in the lead. We are going to win. We're going to make this happen if the next three presenters don't mess this up. Speaking of the next presenters, it pleases me to bring the next person to the screen. She is not only a regular performer on the Encyclopedia Show, but is one of the most recent guests on the Theater of Public Policy. Please give a huge round of applause to the Minnesota bird chick, Sharon Steitler.
Woo! Thank you, Doug. All right. Well, I thought about policies today, and I thought about many things. I thought of my own personal policies. I thought of my policies in dealing with text messages and people, like flat out racism. I'm going to block you. And then I started thinking about things when people get annoying in my text messages. It's like, maybe we had a good connection and then we don't. So I put you on my policy of my 1 in 5 rule. And that means I only respond to you out of 1 in 5 text messages. And then usually you get the good, you get the message and you either chill out or you just go away. And I find that it's a really useful policy. Many people know me from birding, and in birding, we have so many crazy policies. Like if you're into listing, you have all the policies that you use for listing. Like, let's say you go by the American Birding Association rules or the ABA rules. And so if you're going to count all the birds that you see, how do you do that? So maybe that is you saying that I will count birds if I hear them, even if I don't see them, which honestly, I think that is a fantastic policy if you are doing things with nightjars. But at the end of the day, I am a federal employee. And as a federal employee, we love policy. No one loves policy more than us. As a matter of fact, the only thing a federal employee loves more than policy is an acronym. Policies are practically a fetish for us. And I'm going to say that it might get me fired. I doubt it will get me fired because we're in the middle of a pandemic, but in the federal government, we love policies. You know, when I first started as a federal employee, I used to mock policies, and I relished in ways that I could tap dance around them to try and accomplish whatever I wanted for my program. But as I worked my way up and I got higher in the federal food chain and I would become head of different projects, I hated to admit it to myself, but I realized how needed policies are, because people will come up with all kinds of insane nonsense to do what they want, which is what I did. But I felt like when I did that as an underling, I was reasonable about it. And sometimes you can kind of let someone do whatever they want as long as it's not making anyone upset. But when they go off the rails, you have limited options as to rein them in. And if you've ever worked with someone who's gone off the rails, you know that it can be really hard to get them back on the track, or if you need to terminate them. So that's why policy comes in. And when you've been with the federal government long enough, when someone says, well, I'm going to invoke this policy, you know you need to start towing the line. So when I started at my park, I was an underling. And as I started to go up, I was given all these things that were affectionately referred to as collateral duty, AKA I was put in charge of the park's social media team because I have the career as bird chick outside the Park Service, so I know some stuff about social media. Now, there are 419 park sites within the National Park Service. The celebrity ones, like let's say your Yellowstones or your Yosemites, they have teams that can take on their media. They in fact have social media teams and these crazy social media plans. Whereas at my park, it's like, oh, you have to run this visitor center. Oh, and on top of that, you also have to run all the social medias. And you'll watch webinars and they'll tell you at the Yosemites and the Yellowstones that, you know, you need at least 3 people to do a Facebook Live. And then you want to hire an outside source to maybe live caption it. And that's when you realize I'm running 2 visitor centers and I only really have 10 minutes a day to share a link on the park's Facebook page. That's really what I was going to do and call it good. What is this magical thing called a team? So that's when it was decided that, you know what, we need an actual social media policy. And that's when I came up with a poliception, if you will. So there's the policymakers who make the policy, and then I was making a policy in my park. So I was actually making a policy within a policy. And I just found it fascinating that this one-time web blogger, got a way to actually create federal policy that was signed by a superintendent and is now actually used as an example in other parks of what you should do. Granted, it's social media, but I have written federal policy. So right before this was assigned to me, I had some trips planned and I found myself getting stuck in a Lisbon airport. And so there I was in Portugal and I was like, I'm kind of bored. Why don't I just start hammering out this social media policy? And it was really quite interesting as I was working on it because I was kind of digging in deep to what had happened to the social media in the past. And I found all kinds of crazy nonsense, like a Facebook page specifically for the park that was created by a volunteer who would just be like, hey, give me your stuff and I'll post it for you. And it's like, if this is an official national park thing, maybe official national park people should have it. And then I found all kinds of accounts for our national park site, and they had been started by people who hadn't worked for the park for, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 years. So I had to track them down and be like, hey, you started this for us? Well, it's kind of considered actual park stuff now. And yeah, you know how you started that with your personal account? I kind of need that personal account. Here, let's have a beer and maybe you'll share your password with me and maybe I can use that to kind of take over stuff. So it took a long time to rein in all of those social media accounts and to like get people to share their PII with me, their private information. But I reined it in and I made a document, a secure document. So like, okay, these are the social media accounts we have. These are the passwords we have. Here's how it's hidden. If I'm hit by a bus, this is the person that can find it. And then the Park Service was like, we're going to be helpful. And we're going to tell you how to rename all of your park sites under federal branding based on your park. And we're also going to tell you how to do your passwords. And this will make it so that if you get hit by a bus tomorrow, everybody's going to be able to figure things out. And part of the problem with that is my park is the Mississippi River. Well, the full name is Mississippi National River and Recreation Area. And our 4-letter code is MISS, which kind of makes it sound a little dominatrixy because we have programs like Paddle Share. And so if we're going to do Paddle Share, we have to identify it as our park, and in social media, everything's abbreviated. So we have kind of the unfortunate name of Miss Paddle Share. Do with that what you will. But at the end of the day, it's a kayak sharing program. When social distancing is over, I highly recommend you do it. It's a great time. I even lead some trips on there as long as it's 10 people or less. So anyway, got all that settled out. And so as I'm hammering out the social media policy, I'm like, I'm going to write this. I'm going to write the heck out of this. And I'm going to explain to everybody what social media is in this. And I'm going to do it in a great way. I used a bacon meme to explain what social media is. And I felt a little point of pride that I brought bacon into social media, and it got signed by my superintendent. And it is actual policy now. And it's been shared by other parks. But I did one thing that was really important with my park social media policy is that I decided that if someone wanted to start a new platform, because everybody comes at you with ideas, especially when they're new, that we were not allowed to start a new platform unless 3 permanent employees said, yes, I will run this. Because what happens is we get seasonal employees, we get interns, and they're all like, oh, MFG, you don't have TikTok. We have to have TikTok right now. Why don't we TikTok? And we should just TikTok. And then, their season ends and then no TikTok. So I was like, so when they come at me, I'm just like, yes, we are, this is a fantastic idea, but according to the policy, we can't have that unless you can talk 3 permanent employees into running it after you're gone. And it has saved me so many headaches. It even saved me a headache when someone who is several pay grades above me, I don't want to say it's my superintendent, came to me one day very concerned about why we didn't have a Pinterest account. I was like, we can't start a Pinterest account unless 2 other people want to start that account with you. And it saved us a lot of hassle with Pinterest. But I did talk them into, why don't we just create content that other people can share on Pinterest? And I realized that policy had suddenly come for me, something that I needed to dodge, something that became a source of power. I can't tell you the mad feeling of power I have when someone comes to me with an idea. And I'm sure it's a great idea. It's just none of us have time to employ it. And like, we have to do this. We have to be on all the Snapchats. I'm like, that's great, but the policy says this. It's been signed. I wrote it. And they can't do it. And it's like, this isn't going to be my headache when they go away. And I just feel so satisfied with power. And I admit that there's a tiny part of teenage Sharon that is out there just being all like, oh God, you are just a policy person. I bet you do nothing but drink beer and spout acronyms all day with relish. But it has saved me so many work headaches. So I know policy is something that we all kind of like, ugh, policy, but at the end of the day, it can save you massive amounts of headaches. So anyway, that's all I have to say about policies. Cheers, Duck.
Cheers, Sharon. All right. Policy in the parks, keeping us from watching TikTok videos of woodcocks. Hey, Sharon, is there anything that you would like to point our audience towards while we have you here today?
Okay, yes, because everything is canceled right now, my park has started something called Coffee with a Ranger, and it's 10 a.m. Central Time, Tuesdays and Fridays, and it's me or one of my colleagues. Like today, we had Ranger Kyle talk to you for 30 minutes about how to find mushrooms. And so I'll be doing it this Friday. We'll have a subject. I'm sure mine will be bird related. I haven't decided it yet, but you can ask us questions. And then next week, we're gonna have Ranger Paula, who's gonna give pointers on how to get into the federal job system, which I have to tell you right now is pretty good because I'm working from home and I still have a paycheck.
All right. I'm glad we're still paying Sharon. Levi, what did you think of Sharon's performance?
Oh, hey, Duck. Hey, great work, Sharon. Always great to hear from you. Your lovely energy, and I love how frequently I can count on seeing you and knowing that somewhere in the background there will be a soft butt of some kind. So that's just delightful. I have to give you points just for that happening at all. So a lot of really good stuff there. A lot of good Ranger stuff. And a few things I want to touch on. Let's see. I got nervous that we were going to go down a whole birding policy rabbit hole. So I really appreciate us sort of dodging that bullet. And then you did mention that you have a 1 in 5 texts responses policy. You shared that with us. I just want to flag for everyone who's paying attention. The takeaway there, what Sharon's really saying is you should text her more, not less. So that's everything everyone should take note of that. If you're not hearing back, amplify it 5 more times. That's really just an important note for people to take into consideration. Let's see. Oh, you mentioned the celebrity social media of parks, and you left off what is probably the most well-respected social media park, the Gateway Arch National Park in Missouri, 192 acres big, probably the most popular social media account for those who really care about it. So that's a bit of a miss there. You mimed typing, and it was accurate. This is how typing looks. So that was true. I got to give you that there. I both gave you truth and lies because it's true that the park should not have TikToks. And it's also sad that we don't get to see rangers struggle to make relevant or compelling TikToks at all. So there's a smash up for us there. You did say a tiny Teen Sharon, and we all know there's nothing tiny about Teen Sharon. We know Teen Sharon was big energy, big personality, so that was wrong. And then I have just another warning for folks. The coffee with the ranger, we all know just by what Sharon shared with us now, that's a way for her to get your passwords so she can steal your social media accounts and take them over. So beware, a lot of danger lies in that ahead. So we have more stuff on the board here. It's getting closer. We do have the truths currently, which is 26, but the lies are coming up close on a 23. So it's still anyone's game.
Oh, it's making me sweat. I don't want to stay in this house another 8 weeks, but thank you, Levi, and thank you so much, Sharon, for your presentation. And now it is my pleasure and my joy to welcome to the screens in your home a very multi-talented individual. He's a poet, he's a musician, he's an educator, he's 30 things that I'm not even listing off right now. I always love it when he's here at the Encyclopedia Show. I always love having him when we perform together with Blackout Improv. Please welcome to your screens, the one and only Kari Jackson.
Yeah, can you hear me? Thumbs up if you can hear me. Okay, cool. Yeah, this is something I'm looking forward to. It's very important to me right now, and hopefully to a lot of other people. So we're just going to dive in here. We're going to start with the poem, one of many that were carved into the walls of the infamous Angel Island between 1910 and 1940. Imprisoned in the wooden building day after day, my freedom withheld. How can I bear to talk about it? I look to see who is happy, but they only sit quietly. I am anxious and depressed and cannot fall asleep. The days are long and bottle constantly empty. My sad mood, even so, is not dispelled. Nights are long and the pillow cold. Who can pity my loneliness? After experiencing such loneliness and sorrow, why not just return home plow the fields. From settle.org, these poems were written by overseas Chinese immigrants on the walls of the Angel Island Immigration Station located in the San Francisco Bay. Between 1910 and 1940, as many as 175,000 Chinese immigrants were detained and processed at Angel Island. Here are a few more poems that were written. Because my house had bare walls, I began rushing all about. The waves are happy, laughing. When I arrived on the island, I heard I was forbidden to land. I could do nothing but frown and feel angry at heaven. Next poem. In the quiet of night, I heard faintly the whistling of wind. The forms and shadows saddened me. Upon seeing the landscape, I composed a poem. The floating clouds, the fog darken the sky. The moon shines faintly as the insects chirp. Grief and bitterness entwined are heaven sent. The sad person sits alone, leaning by a window. And finally, America has power, but not justice. In prison, we were victimized as if we were guilty. Given no opportunity to explain, it was really brutal. I bow my head in reflection, but there is nothing I can do. Settle.org continues. Because of the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882, spurred by racism and economic fears, Angel Island served more as a detention and deportation center than an immigration processing center. Thousands of Chinese immigrants were detained and interrogated at the barracks in a prison-like atmosphere for weeks, months, or years. Life for the detainees was strange, stressful, demoralizing, and humiliating. Separated from family members, they were placed in crowded communal living quarters. 100 persons would sleep in bunk beds, 3 high in columns, in a room about 1,000 square feet, end quote. This may help explain the need to express oneself by carving onto the walls. Maybe one day, someone may finally hear you. This policy and the racism underneath it did not only impact immigrants from China. AsiaSociety.org says by 1924, nearly all Asian immigrants, including Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, and Indians, were fully excluded by law, denied citizenship and naturalization, and prevented from marrying Caucasians or owning land. Filipinos were technically allowed due to annexation of the Philippines in the 1898 Spanish-American War, but they were still targets of discrimination and violence. While the policy itself may have ended, bigotry and fear continue in all conceivable forms. This leads to today. One of the worst outcomes of the coronavirus epidemic is the rise of hatred and harassment of anyone perceived as Asian by someone who is not. James C. Hugh in Slate says, this trend of harassment and violence is reminiscent of the hate in San Francisco in the 1900 plague outbreak, as well as Toronto's SARS outbreak in 2003. There's an org called the Asian Pacific Policy and Planning Council, who began calling for reports of violence that's happened to people that may be you or people that you know. And from just 1 week, here's some examples, and I'm only reading a few. I am posting this on behalf of my dad. He's a 71-year-old Korean adoptee. Yesterday, he was chased out of a rural convenience store after asking to use the restroom while traveling along I-5 through California to get to Portland, Oregon. Someone else says, my parents, who have been American citizens for 30 years and have not been out of the country in 20 years, experienced 3 young white men who were physically aggressive towards them until my parents left the premises. No one did anything to stop this. Someone else says, my niece was at a local grocery store today, and this lady spat on an Asian family after insulting them by stating that coronavirus was their fault. A family of 5 was visiting as part of a tour. Several cars pulled close as the family was walking. Occupants of cars then proceeded to roll down their windows, cough forcefully at the family, laugh, and speed off. Someone else says, I was shopping and a child grabbed my arm. The child said I should go back to my country and I was the reason his father died. The mother came up and put her hand on my arm. She didn't try to help me. I'll pause there. So those are just a small sample of the heinousness that is happening in our communities around the country, but to be specific, mostly California, and then New York is a little bit behind, just based on this weekly report. So since then, who knows where else it is spreading at a rapid rate. From 1882 to 2020, how much fundamentally has changed? Many of us know these acts are not new. They simply resurface like viruses that we hoped were finally gone. But this cannot be normalized, not in 2020. So I want to close out with 3 questions. 1, how do we stand up for each other? 2, how do we educate each other? And finally, how will we check ourselves? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kari. Oh man, that's really that's super heartfelt. That's super important, and we really appreciate you bringing that to the show. Is there anything that you would like to point our audience to while we have you on their monitors and television sets?
Support the post service. Like for real. There's also a number you can text that I did this morning. Is really quick. You can look it up, but yeah, if you want to help out the post office by contacting your Congress people, there's a quick way to do that. So look it up or hit me up later if you want to find out how.
Awesome. Thanks again, Kari. Levi, are you ready to make some jokes about that, Levi?
Hey, Doc. So glad to be back. This is a pretty common, it's been a while since I was at the Encyclopedia Show, but I was the fact checker for a number of years. And a common problem we ran into with Kari is the jokes weren't always clear. So I know he was doing a really funny piece. So what I have is just a few tips to think about as Kari continues to make these layered sort of comedic art pieces. So some things that you could have added is all I'm saying. Some funny voices, I think, would have put in another layer. Perhaps a silly costume, like even a wig or a hat would really bring out the humor that often we get distracted by because the racism is so loud. It's hard to see all the jokes that you're making. I think additionally, even just pulling some funny faces would really add something. If you have a keyboard right there, sound effects go a long way, so just like a slide whistle or like a wah, wah, wah trombone, like really just adds a layer. So those are some things to think about. But I know, you know, we've been in this conversation for a long time. The biggest challenges I always have as a fact checker with Kari is his jokes are too complex for me. And I know he knows how to handle nunchucks. So it's really hard to give feedback with both of those contexts in place. So in reality, that was beautiful, upsettingly true. So I didn't actually get a chance to do any truths or lies. I drew a breaking heart, a Mr. Yuck face, and then there is a phone line in Minnesota if you witness anti-Chinese, anti-Asian racism or discrimination. The governor's office is actually encouraging folks to call and report. I will also say, if you're somewhere and you see something like that happening, particularly if you are a white person, disrupt that behavior. You're going to be uncomfortable, and if you feel uncomfortable, imagine how the other folks feel. So absolutely, you know, support the post office, as Kari mentioned, but also it's really on us, people who have white skin, to go, hey, you just said a thing, it's not cool. You just did a thing, it's not cool. Because we're way less likely to be the target of that sort of thing. No one's going to come after us. So that's my biggest note to everybody. Everyone who doesn't say that's not okay, they get a lie added to their column, and eventually their lies will take over and they will be defeated. So thanks for sharing it. Really great work, Kari. And again, I'll just send you some comedy tips for later on that you can consider about folding in.
Awesome. Thank you, Levi. Thank you, Kari. So powerful. We're so close in the score, and we still have one presenter left. And that presenter happens to be the co-producer of this show. He's the one who helps me put this all together. He's one of the reasons that we're still able to do this after 8 years of performances. You might know him from a show called Reverend Matt's Monster Science. Please welcome to your screen, the Reverend Matthew Kessen.
Hi, I'm Reverend Matt, and there comes a time in the annals of the law when those who have been given the public trust must guide the rudder of the state using all of the resources, information, and wisdom they can bring to bear to make firm decisions and clear policies on the subject of Bigfoot. In fact, there are laws in the books, you know, the books, dealing with all manner of cryptozoological creatures, which is to say animals that some believe to exist, but that are unproven to science. In fact, there are so many such laws that I cannot cover them all in the time allotted, which is, of course, completely amazing, a world worth saving. So instead, we will look at those instances of the extension of legal protection to Sasquatches and Yetis and things like that. Now, one thing that's unusual about Sasquatch law is, well, a lot of cryptozoology law is apparently lighthearted, something enacted to attract tourists or just what passes for fun in legislative sessions, with the end result being roughly equivalent to a rapping used car salesman. Champ, the lake monster of Lake Champlain on the New York-Vermont border, is in fact protected by both of those states, and that is a seeming example of this. In 1986, Jämtland, Sweden put a local lake monster, Storstjordjuret or something like that, on the endangered species list, though it was taken off again in 2005. One imagines the 1980s legislators being super chill and laid back. You could buy pot from them, only to later be replaced by a whole lot of John Lithgow in Footlooses. But weirdly, for the hairy man-ape ones, the legal ramifications are usually for more serious reasons. Sometimes these creatures make it into legal proceedings out of genuine belief. In Florida, in the 1970s, a man named Dave Shealy twice attempted to get laws passed protecting the local cryptid, the skunk ape, which is not an ape that's all black with a white stripe down its back and a big bushy tail, no matter how hard I wish it were, which is very, very hard. No, it's just an ape that smells bad. Shealy had twice witnessed the skunk ape himself, and he was just concerned. Alas, the Florida House of Representatives did not share his concern and voted his legislation down both times. Insert Florida man joke here. Sometimes officials just seem to be hedging their bets. In 1959, prior to a major American Yeti hunting expedition, the American Embassy in Kathmandu, Nepal, sent a dispatch to the US Department of State entitled Regulations Governing Mountain Climbing Expeditions in Nepal Related to Yeti. It read as follows. 1. Royalty of RS 5000/1 Indian currency will have to be paid to His Majesty's Government of Nepal for a permit to carry out an expedition in search of Yeti. 2. In case Yeti is traced, it can be photographed or caught alive, but must not be killed or shot at, except in an emergency arising out of self-defense. All photographs taken of the animal, the creature itself, if captured alive or dead, must be surrendered to the government of Nepal at the earliest time. 3. News and reports throwing light on the actual existence of the creature must be submitted to the government of Nepal as soon as they are available, and must not in any way be given out to press or reporters for publicity without the permission of the government of Nepal. What are you hiding, Nepal? The Yeti? Nice. So they're not saying there is a Yeti, but that if there is, that it's theirs. Fair enough. And then sometimes there's Sasquatch law for completely real, practical reasons. In 1969, the Skamania County, Washington Board of Commissioners passed the following ordinance, which rather speaks for itself. Be it hereby ordained by the Board of County Commissioners of Skamania County. Whereas there is evidence to indicate the possible existence in Skamania County of a nocturnal primate mammal variously described as an ape-like creature or a subspecies of Homo sapiens. And whereas both legend and purported recent sightings and spoor support this possibility. And whereas this creature is generally and commonly known as Sasquatch, Yeti, Bigfoot, or giant hairy ape, and has resulted in an influx of scientific investigators as well as casual hunters, many armed with lethal weapons. And whereas the absence of specific laws covering the taking of specimens encourages laxity in the use of firearms and other deadly devices and poses a clear and present threat to the safety and well-being of persons living and traveling within the boundaries of Skamania County, as well as to the creatures themselves. Therefore, be it resolved that any premeditated, willful, and wanton slaying of such a creature shall be deemed a felony, punishable by a fine not to exceed $10,000 and or imprisonment in the county jail for a period not to exceed 5 years. So, basically a law attempting to prevent really idiotic people from running around in the woods with guns. Sometimes the only way to get any kind of limitations on maniacs with firearms in America is to bring in Bigfoot. Still in all, 5 years of hard time for shooting Bigfoot. What are you in for, kid? I shot Bigfoot. You wouldn't even need a gang. The warden would call you sir, or ma'am, or whatever you like. Then, sometimes the reasons are harder to figure out. The Sakteng Wildlife Sanctuary in Bhutan is 253 square miles of land set aside in 2001 for the Migo or Migoi, the Bhutanese Yeti. And Bhutan is not a wealthy nation, and one of its primary industries is lumber. And yet all of this forested land has been protected for the Migoi. It is difficult to find information in the Western press as to motivation, genuine belief, attempted tourism. No English language source seems to know, though one makes reference to Bhutan's prime minister in 1998, introducing the concept of gross national happiness as opposed to gross national product. This, of course, is often met with derision. But, you know, sometimes people pay a lot of attention to Bigfoot, like you just have, which can hardly be called productive. And maybe happiness is actually better than productivity. Thank you, Doc.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you so much. Wow, Bigfoot law. Who knew that there was so much Bigfoot law? and that it influences gun policy. I think that that's great. Matt, do you have anything coming up that you would like our audience to know about?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Every Thursday on Twitch, I do my show, Reverend Matt's Monster Science, which is basically like what you've just seen, only like an hour long. Every Thursday at 8 p.m. Central Time, twitch.tv/Reverend Matt. This week, I'm doing Better Armageddons Than This, which is about the monsters of really big, terrible apocalypses, as opposed to sad, weird ones. And so that's this Thursday at 8, and then every Thursday at 8 going forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Before I turn everything over to Levi, I just want to remind the audience one more time that if you've enjoyed the show, please make a contribution, a donation to the Theater of Public Policy. There's a link pinned to the top of the Facebook Live feed, I know for sure. They're the reason that we can be here. They're the reason why all of our presenters today are getting a little bit of compensation for their work. And we're really, really grateful for that. So please help the Theater of Public Policy make things like this happen by donating. If this is your first time being exposed to the Theater of Public Policy, I also encourage throwing a like on their social media, on their Facebooks. And you can also, if you haven't already, and you should have by now, given us a like on the Encyclopedia Show Facebook page as well. That's the Encyclopedia Show Minneapolis, because it is performed in cities all around the world. But we are the front runner. We've done this show more times than any other show on the globe. So that's pretty fantastic. Give us some love for that. And that said, let's give some love to Levi as he comes back to our screens. Levi.
Oh, thank you, Duck. I love love. Really appreciate that. I will say once again, yes, please support the Theater of Public Policy, or Teen Danger will come to your house and explain something to you. So you do not want that. Keep the support going so that he does it in these official platforms and not at your doorstep or outside your window. Matt Kessen, certainly not the first time I've encountered your work. I would say this was a shorter piece than you're typically presenting, and yet it still felt too long. So that's pretty happy with that. Pretty happy with that joke, I have to say, and also still kind of honest. Matt, you were kind of all over the place, to be honest with you. Here's the thing. I feel it foolish that I have to explain this to you, but I think we all know, anyone who supports the study that we call cryptozoology, a Sasquatch, a Yeti, a Bigfoot, why would we be interchanging these terms? These are not the same thing. So yeah, you started off with, this is a Sasquatch law, it became Bigfoot law, there was some sprinklings of Yeti law. Usually you're really well known for your ability to really focus and dig into a concept. And here I feel like you're talking about wildly different categories. I don't know many people who are obsessed with Bigfoot who also care about Yetis. That's a whole different community. I think you know that better than anyone. So I would never approach someone who wore their custom jumpsuit that said, I love Sasquatch, and say, hey, have you been doing any Yeti hunting lately? They'd slap me right in the mouth, and I would deserve it. So that concerned me a lot. A few things I do want to mention. I think it's safe that we could call you the Jane Goodall of Apes Rarely Seen. So that's a callback to Javier's piece. Pretty proud of that one. You mentioned the law about only being able to kill a Yeti in self-defense. I just have to point out, and this is really a quibble with you because you were accurate, but if you're hunting a creature, it's acting in self-defense, and if it hurts you, you were asking for it. So that's just a thing I wanted to share with everybody. You said, what are you hiding, Nepal? They're hiding the delicious steamed dumpling called momos. That's what Nepal is hiding. So just to answer that question, you used the phrase lethal weapons, and at no point did you mention rigs or Murtaugh. So that was a huge oversight on your part. We really needed you to spend some time talking about the Lethal Weapon franchise, which if people are staying at home, they should really consider revisiting. There's some lovely stuff in there, acknowledging that Mel Gibson is highly problematic. We can all acknowledge that. You also alluded to the fact that if you killed a Bigfoot, you would be regarded highly in prison. but we all know that Bigfoot killers are considered worse than child predators in prison. And we know child predators are, they're frowned on in prison. So that's something there as well. You also use the phrase gross national product. Just made me think of earwax. Thought I should share that with everybody. So here's the deal though. You jumped all over the place, but your facts were sound. So your focus was wild and varied, but in reality, you were throwing big numbers on the board. So the reality is, because of your hard work, Matthew, we are able to say the truth has won out and the show has been a success. The quarantine will not be extended any further than we already had planned. So kudos to Matthew and to everyone else for your hard work today. Heck of a job. Really well done.
Yeah. Yes, awesome. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Levi. This is the weirdest version of like a Groundhog Day situation. We don't have 8 more weeks of quarantine, which is fantastic. And if for some reason that doesn't end up being the case, I'm gonna come back and follow up with all of you.
Just to be clear, we're going to have more quarantine. It just won't have additional 8 weeks.
Right.
That's just so people know.
It's
not over.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification. If you like this show, first of all, tell all your friends, tell all your family. We are going to do more encyclopedia shows. We actually, at the beginning of May, we're going to do 4 more online shows, the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th of May. So you can follow us on our Facebook page to learn more about what all the different topics we're going to do are going to be. We hope we'll see you there. Thank you for being there. Please, in your homes, even though they can't hear it, give another large round of applause to our performers. We really appreciate having you all here. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful night. I would normally say tip your waiter and drive safely, but stay on your couch and compliment your significant other or your cat. All right. Good night, everybody. All right, I'm gonna hope that they ended the Facebook live feed now. Thank you all so much for being here. It was wonderful.
Thank you, Doc.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Thanks, Doc.
Good to
job,
see you
everybody.
all.
Good to see you all.
You guys are good at what you do.
It was nice socialization.
Good